Hello, all my creative brains. I'm Celeste Remington, author of The Elephant Scroll and Tips for Magicians. And today we're going to talk about getting ideas, where they come from, and how you can start some story ideas of your own. First of all, where did I get my ideas for The Elephant Scroll? Well, I started with personal experience. You can think of things that you have done, places you've gone, and things you've accomplished, and then start a story from there by asking imaginative questions like, what if? So what I did is I thought about a time that I used to work at a zoo. Here is my zoo shirt. And you can even see my name tag right there. The Henry Dorley Zoo is where I used to work when I was 16 years old. And while I worked there, I had the opportunity to work on the zoo train, give the zoo train speech from the caboose, and see all the animals. And I started thinking, what if I actually lived in a zoo instead of just working in a zoo? Not as an animal, but as a person with a house on the zoo property. And what if when all the doors were closed, the gates were closed, and the zoo was closed and there were no visitors, I could wander around the zoo and see the animals and talk to them whenever I wanted. So I used those imaginative questions about an experience I actually had, and then I made something fiction by asking myself, what if it was different? What if this happened or that happened? I asked, what if a child lived in a zoo? Why would they live in a zoo? Where would they live? And who would be their special animal friend? So that's one thing you can do, personal experience. The next thing you can do to sleuth out some ideas, just like this, would be to think about the things you're interested in. Well, I'm really interested in animals, especially elephants. And since I was thinking about a story about a zoo, I thought, what if I made the main character's best friend that's an animal, an elephant? Then I could learn more about elephants, find interesting elephant facts and things that elephants do, and use those things in my story. Then I asked more what if questions. What if the girl in my story of the zoo was best friends with the African elephant? And what if instead of hearing the elephant's low rumblings when the elephant communicates, what if this girl could see the elephant's memories? But one more thing that I did is I wrote about fears. Think about something that you've been afraid of in the past, and maybe you're not afraid of it anymore. Think about how you solved that problem of being afraid. What did you do that helped you overcome that fear? Did you face your fear head on and realize it wasn't as scary as you thought? Did you talk to a trusted adult? Did you talk to your best friend? Did a pet help you? There are a lot of different things that you could think about that maybe you used to be afraid of, but you have conquered it, or you're working through it now. Then you can write a story about a character who has that same fear, because when you write about that, you will make it very realistic because you personally know what it's like to be afraid of that thing. I was afraid of tornadoes when I was a kid, and I still am as an adult now. They're very scary storms, and they're very scary if they're coming right to your neighborhood. I had some close encounters with tornadoes, so I used that fear and wrote about it in The Elephant Scroll. When I wrote Tips for Magicians, I also used my interest in animals, and I found out about hawks and falcons and falconry in the desert. That was an interest of mine. Something else I was interested in was art. Here's some art that is featured in Tips for Magicians. Gemstones, also featured in Tips for Magicians, and a lot of adventure in the desert, which I also find interesting, and I have personal experience with that. So this is my challenge to you, creative brains. Think about personal experiences you've had, think about things you're interested in, and try out maybe writing about a fear that you've had, that you're working through or you've overcome. Now get your pencils and your paper and brainstorm a few of those ideas yourself, then ask imaginative questions on how you could turn that into a fiction story. Have fun with that, and I'll see you next time.